Have you ever trusted someone with your entire heart, only to have that trust ripped apart by a secret so dark, so unthinkable, that it changes everything you thought you knew about them? I'm talking about the kind of betrayal that doesn't just hurt. It rewrites your past, makes you question every memory, every laugh, every late-night confession, until you're left wondering if you ever really knew them at all. My name is Rachel, and I've spent the last decade believing my best friend was my rock, my safe place, until one chilling discovery turned my life upside down. If you've ever been blindsided by someone you loved, or if you've ever had to face a truth so painful it threatens to break you, stay with me. This isn't just a story about friendship. It's about loyalty, heartbreak, and the desperate search for answers when the person you trusted most might be a stranger. I'm sitting here in my tiny apartment in Chicago, the city's restless hum filtering through the window, staring at an old Polaroid of me and my best friend from a time when life felt simpler, safer. It's past midnight, and I can't sleep, haven't been able to for weeks, because the weight of what I've uncovered keeps dragging me back to a past I thought I understood. If you've ever felt like your world has been turned inside out, or if you've ever had to confront a secret that threatens to unravel everything, then you'll get why I need to tell this story, even if it tears me apart to relive it. Let's go back to a time when I was just a teenager in a windy Midwest suburb, to a friendship that felt like family, until a single, devastating truth changed everything. I grew up in Naperville, a quiet suburb just outside Chicago, where the streets are lined with tidy houses and ancient oak trees, and the biggest drama was usually who won the high school football game on Friday night. My childhood was pretty ordinary: two working parents, a younger brother who annoyed me to no end, and a cul-de-sac full of kids to run around with during endless summer days. But beneath the surface, I always felt a little out of place, like I didn't quite fit into the cookie-cutter mold of suburban life. My dad was a mechanic, always tinkering in the garage with oil-stained hands, and my mom worked as a receptionist at a local dentist's office, her smile hiding the exhaustion of long hours. We weren't poor, but we weren't flush either, and I learned early on to keep my head down, to not ask for too much. I was a shy, awkward kid, more comfortable with books than people, often escaping to the local library or hiding in my room with a sketchpad, drawing the world as I wished it could be. That all changed when I was 13, the year I met Lila. It was the first day of 8th grade, and I was sitting alone at lunch, picking at a soggy PB&J sandwich in the cafeteria, when this girl with wild curly hair and a mischievous grin plopped down across from me like we'd known each other forever. Lila was everything I wasn't: bold, loud, unafraid to stand out in a sea of conformity. She wore mismatched socks and a denim jacket covered in pins, and she talked a mile a minute about how she'd just moved to Naperville from the city because her mom got a new job. I didn't know why she picked me to sit with, but from that moment, something clicked. Lila became my person, the one who dragged me out of my shell, who made me laugh until my sides hurt, who turned my quiet, lonely world into something vibrant and alive. We were inseparable, two misfits against the world, spending afternoons biking around town, sneaking into abandoned lots to spray paint murals, or just lying on the grass in my backyard, staring at the sky and dreaming about escaping to somewhere bigger, better. By high school, Lila and I were a package deal. We'd walk the halls of Naperville Central together, her arm slung around my shoulder, ignoring the whispers from the popular crowd who didn't get our weird, artsy vibe. I was still the quieter one, content to let her take the lead, but she brought out a side of me I didn't know I had: a bravery, a willingness to take risks. We'd skip class sometimes to sit by the DuPage River, dipping our toes in the chilly water, talking about everything from crushes to family drama to what we'd do after graduation. Lila's home life was messier than mine. Her mom was a single parent, always working late as a nurse, and her dad had been out of the picture since she was little. She didn't talk about him much, just vague mentions of him being gone, and I never pushed, sensing it was a wound she didn't want to reopen. Instead, I became her family, and she became mine. My parents adored her, calling her the daughter they never had, and even my annoying brother looked up to her like she was some kind of superhero. Our friendship wasn't perfect, though. There were fights, little cracks that showed up over time, especially as we got older and the pressures of life started to weigh on us. Lila had a reckless streak, a need to push boundaries that sometimes scared me. She'd drag me to parties I didn't want to go to, where I'd stand awkwardly in the corner while she flirted with older guys or drank too much. I'd get mad, tell her she was being stupid, and she'd snap back that I needed to loosen up, that I was too boring for my own good. But we always made up, usually within a day, because the thought of losing her was worse than any argument. I needed her, more than I could ever admit out loud. She was my anchor, the one who made me feel seen when I felt invisible to everyone else. I'd lie awake at night sometimes, listening to the distant hum of traffic on I-88, worrying about her, wondering if her wildness would get her into real trouble one day, but I pushed the thought away, convinced we'd always have each other's backs. The emotional conflict inside me started to grow as we approached the end of high school. I was 17, caught between wanting to hold on to our carefree days and the looming reality of the future. I'd been accepted into a small art college in Chicago, a dream I'd barely dared to voice, while Lila was floundering, unsure of what she wanted. She talked about maybe becoming a tattoo artist or just figuring it out while working odd jobs, but I could see the uncertainty in her eyes, the fear of being left behind. I felt guilty for moving forward, for wanting something more than Naperville, but I also resented her sometimes for not having a plan, for making me feel like I had to carry her along. I'd sit in my room, sketching her face over and over, trying to capture the fire in her eyes and feel this ache. A mix of love and frustration, a longing to keep her close even as I knew we were drifting in different directions. The river where we'd spent so many afternoons became a symbol of that tension, its current pulling us apart even as we sat on its banks, pretending everything was fine. When I left for college at 18, the distance between us became literal. Chicago was only an hour away, but it felt like a different world, gritty, loud, full of possibility. I threw myself into my classes, learning to paint and sculpt, making new friends who shared my passion for art. Lila stayed in Naperville, working at a diner and occasionally texting me memes or random updates. But our conversations grew shorter, more surface level. I'd come home for holidays, and we'd try to recapture the old magic, grabbing cheap coffee at the local diner or walking along the riverwalk downtown. But there was always this unspoken gap, a sense that we weren't the same girls who'd once shared everything. I missed her, missed the way she'd made me feel invincible, but I also felt this quiet relief at being on my own, at not having to worry about her chaos. I'd walk along Lake Michigan on lonely nights, the city skyline glittering in the distance, and feel torn between my new life and the old one I'd left behind, wondering if I'd outgrown her or if I was just too scared to admit I still needed her. Years passed, and I graduated at 22, landing a job as a graphic designer at a small firm in Chicago. I was 25 when I started to notice Lila pulling away even more. Her texts became sporadic, her social media posts vague and cryptic, pictures of dark alleys, captions about starting over, hints of a life I didn't understand. When I did see her, usually on quick trips home, she looked different, thinner, edgier, with new tattoos snaking up her arms and a hardness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She'd brush off my questions, saying she was fine, just figuring stuff out, but I could tell something was wrong. I'd lie awake in my apartment, the city's noise a restless backdrop to my thoughts, worrying about her, feeling this gnawing guilt for not being there, for letting our friendship fade. I'd scroll through old photos on my phone, us at 16, laughing at some stupid inside joke, and feel this hollow longing for a connection I wasn't sure we could ever get back. I told myself I'd reach out more, make time to really talk, but life always got in the way, work deadlines, dating flops, the grind of city living. The unexpected twist came just after my 27th birthday, on a cold February evening when the wind howled through Chicago's streets like it was trying to warn me of something. I'd just gotten home from a long day at the office, my fingers still numb from the commute, when my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, assuming it was spam, but something made me pick up. It was a mutual friend from high school, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, and her voice was shaky as she asked if I'd heard from Lila lately. My stomach dropped as she told me Lila had been arrested, caught up in some kind of drug bust in a sketchy part of the city. I sat there, frozen, as she explained what little she knew. Lila had been hanging with the wrong crowd, possibly dealing, and now she was in jail, waiting for a bail hearing. My mind reeled, unable to reconcile the girl who'd once painted murals with me with someone who'd fallen so far. I hung up, my hands trembling, feeling like the ground had been yanked out from under me. That night, I didn't sleep, pacing my apartment with a million questions crashing through my head. How had I not seen this coming? Had there been signs I'd missed, moments I'd ignored because I was too wrapped up in my own life? I dug through old messages, old memories, trying to piece together when things had started to go wrong. I remembered the parties in high school, her reckless streak, the way she'd always seemed to flirt with danger, but I chalked it up to teenage rebellion, not a path to something darker. I felt this suffocating mix of anger and guilt. Anger at her for getting herself into this mess, for not telling me, and guilt for not being there, for letting our friendship slip through my fingers. I sat on my couch, staring at that old Polaroid of us, two goofy teens with no idea what the future held, and felt tears burn my eyes as I realized I might not even know who Lila was anymore. The next day, I drove to Naperville, my heart pounding as I pulled into the familiar streets of my hometown. I didn't know what I was looking for, answers, closure, a way to help, but I couldn't just sit in Chicago and do nothing. I went to Lila's mom's house, a small, rundown place on the edge of town, hoping she'd have some insight. Her mom looked older than I remembered, her face lined with worry, and she let me in with a tired sigh. She didn't know much more than I did, just that Lila had been distant for years, always saying she was handling things, never asking for help. But as we sat at her cluttered kitchen table, surrounded by faded photos of Lila as a kid, her mom handed me a small box of Lila's things, stuff she'd left behind during one of her many moves. Inside were old notebooks, sketches we'd done together, and a folded letter addressed to me, dated 2 years ago. My breath caught as I opened it, seeing Lila's messy handwriting, and read words I wasn't prepared for. In the letter, Lila poured out her heart in a way she never had in person. She wrote about how lost she'd felt after I left for college, how she'd spiraled into bad choices trying to fill the void, how she'd gotten mixed up with people who offered her a sense of belonging, even if it was toxic. She admitted she'd wanted to tell me, to ask for help, but she was too ashamed, too afraid I'd judge her or turn away. She wrote that she missed me, that she'd always seen me as her family, and that she hoped one day I'd forgive her for the mess she'd made. I sat there, the letter trembling in my hands, feeling like my chest had been cracked open. All this time, I thought she was pulling away because she didn't care, but she'd been drowning, and I hadn't even noticed. The guilt was a tidal wave, washing over every memory, making me question if I'd failed her as much as she'd failed herself. Driving back to Chicago, the letter tucked into my bag, I felt like I was in a fog, the familiar highway blurring past as my mind churned. I thought about all the years we'd spent together, the laughter, the secrets, the way she'd made me feel like I mattered. I thought about the distance that had grown between us, the way I'd let my own life take priority, assuming she'd always be there when I was ready to reconnect. Now, faced with the reality of her arrest, her struggles, I didn't know how to feel. Part of me was furious. How could she do this? How could she risk everything for a life that could destroy her? But another part, the louder part, ached for her, for the girl who'd been my best friend, who'd needed me when I wasn't there. I pulled over at a rest stop, the cold air biting at my skin as I stared at the gray sky, and felt this desperate need to understand, to find a way back to her, even if I didn't know if that was possible. Back in my apartment, I spent days wrestling with what to do. I called the jail, learning that Lila's bail had been set, but no one had posted it yet. I didn't have the money to help, not even close, and the thought of reaching out to mutual friends or her mom felt like betraying her privacy. I sat at my desk, sketching her face from memory, trying to capture the Lila I'd known, not the one I'd read about in that letter or heard about on the phone. Every stroke of my pencil felt like a question. Could I forgive her? Could I help her? Could we ever rebuild what we'd lost? I walked along the lakefront, the wind whipping at my coat, and felt the weight of my past pressing down, mixed with a flicker of hope I wasn't sure I deserved. I knew I couldn't fix her problems, couldn't undo the choices she'd made, but I also couldn't walk away, not after everything we'd been through. Reflecting on my own life, I started to see how much of my identity had been tied to Lila, how she'd shaped who I was, even in the years we'd drifted apart. I'd built a career, a life in Chicago, but there was always this missing piece, this void where our friendship had been. I'd sit in coffee shops, watching friends laugh over lattes, and feel this pang of loneliness, a reminder of what I'd lost. I thought about my own mistakes, the times I'd been selfish or distant, and wondered if I'd pushed her away without realizing it. I thought about the letter, her raw honesty, and felt this fragile warmth, a chance to maybe start over, even if it meant facing hard truths. I knew I couldn't save her, not really, but I could be there, could try to understand, and that felt like the least I owed her after all these years. Now, as I sit here weeks after finding that letter, I'm still at a crossroads, caught between the past I've lived and a future I'm not sure how to navigate. Lila's still in jail, awaiting a court date, and I've written to her, a long, messy letter of my own, pouring out my hurt, my love, my confusion, and my hope that we can talk when she's out. I don't know if she'll respond, don't know if she even wants to see me after everything, but I had to try. I've been walking the city streets, the skyline a constant backdrop to my thoughts, feeling the weight of every memory, every choice, every moment I wish I could redo. I've started sketching again, not just her face but scenes from our past. Us by the river, us laughing in my backyard, trying to hold on to the good even as I grapple with the bad. The lake's endless waves remind me that time moves forward, whether I'm ready or not, and I'm left wondering if there's a path back to the friendship we had, or if we're too broken to mend. So, I'm turning to you, whoever's listening out there. Have you ever had to face a betrayal or a secret from someone you loved? Something that made you question everything? How did you find a way forward? How did you decide whether to forgive or let go? I'm torn between reaching out to Lila, showing up for her no matter what, and protecting myself from more pain, from a friendship that might never be the same. I want to believe there's hope, that we can rebuild something, even if it's different, but I'm scared of getting hurt again, scared of failing her again. What would you do if you were me? How do you hold on to someone who's slipping away, or do you let them go for good? I'm sitting here, staring at that old Polaroid, waiting for answers I'm not sure I'll ever find, hoping that maybe, just maybe, there's a way to heal what's been broken. Let me know in the comments. I could really use your thoughts, because right now, I feel more lost than ever.